So last week we had a bit of a deep dive into the modules that help make up your skill damage for skill-based descendants, starting with Freyna. Now in that video we learned how each module and type of skill can be affected differently through various combinations, and how to piece together one of the strongest builds possible for her. Now admittedly, thanks to the comment section, I had missed a couple of mods out, not intentional whatsoever, so with your help I've now had a chance to sit down and go through the mods for Bunny, and how we can maximise her damage potential with her emission skill, fitting nicely into farming builds, or for those with the high voltage transcendent mods who would like to be able to use her for bossing. Now, as we don't have many uses for her ultimate or her first skill, I've looked at every single possible combination for battle and attack mods that she possesses to find you the perfect mods to use just purely for your emission based builds. Now this did take a fair bit of time to be able to put together, so if you did learn something new or useful with this video, do us both a favour and press that subscribe button. I'll be doing skill power breakdowns like this for all the descendants in the game as we go, so if that sounds good to you, why not make it easier to find the channel again in the future. Lastly, if you feel I have missed anything out, or you want to see a specific pairing put together, or even suggest a full build to be able to try out, let me know all that below in the comment section, and I'll do my very best for you. But for now, what are we waiting for? Let's get into that breakdown. So this video is going to be off script, so if it goes a little bit long-winded in some places, I do apologise in advance, but I am just trying to be passionate about the stats and be able to get the most information out to you as possible, which I'd like to think is what you're after, seeing as you've just clicked into this video. Now, to help with this one, what I have done is taken every single one of the attack and the battle mods that do exist, so I believe we have 5 attack mods and we do have 6 battles. That's going to be Technician, Electric Master, Electric Specialist, Focus on Electric, and Singular, Singular Master, Singular Specialist, Power Increase, Skill Simplification, Maximize Power, and lastly Maximize Skill. Now I did miss out a couple of those from the Freyna video by accident, so I have now added them into this video, and I was quite surprised with some of the results. I actually was very surprised with some of these later mods that we do actually get to mess about with. So the idea with this kind of testing for this was that I took the base damage, so what I did was, just to give you an idea, is a rundown for how I kept this consistent, because it is very based on her her electricity charge, so that little bar that's at the bottom there. So to be able to keep this consistent, because you activate the skill through using electricity, I believe it does take a snapshot once you activate your skill, so that's actually quite nice. But essentially, once you interact with the experiment support droid, if I do that, you'll see that I've got a full electricity bar right there. As long as I keep moving, I will constantly keep that full electricity bar. So I have 100% electric power right now, and that is absolutely perfect for what we need to be able to do. That activates every single one of the skills that we have, and that is going to be perfect for being able to activate my V key, which is going to be our emission skill. So to kind of like keep this consistent, I did the exact same thing for every single one of these tests. I'd activate the droid. As soon as I activate the droid, I'd start moving. I'd make my way towards the character. This is going to be one single character. The stuff that I've kept consistent for every single one of these tests so far is that we had a legendary reactor, but it wasn't matching, so this is just purely Singer, just base power that was going into the ability. This was taken at level 40 character Bunny, and the numbers were against level 100 enemies, so every single one of these is going to be, if you are currently in hard mode and everything like that, this is going to be reflective for all the content that you're currently tackling. There was no set bonuses in terms of the components that we had on this, and once again it was taken with full electricity and the ability activated. So to be able to keep this consistent, what I did was, because we were going here, I'd activate my V ability, and then once I've got like here, I'd then make sure that the next hit kind of activated and did the damage. Now we've got the original hit, which is going to be the emission skill itself, and then obviously we've got the damage over time, which is going to be our electrocution. So I had to take down both numbers just to be able to get the proper damage numbers for it. So that's what I did to be able to keep it consistent, but as you can see, even though my electricity is building up, it wasn't doing any more damage, so I was able to consistently get those numbers, and I'd take the first hit with the emission skill, I'd make sure I take that number down, and then if I did need to be able to do a second hit with that to be able to collate like the damage over time with the electrocution, I'd make sure that both of those numbers matched, so there was no fluctuation in terms of the stats that did appear. So in terms of like the stats, though, and just being able to run all the way down the list, we can start with the attack mods first if you would like to. So the base ability, just landing, like I said, without any of those stuff that was keeping it consistent. The base ability hit for 14,485 points of damage, and the electrocution hit for 2,523 per tick, and that was 3 ticks, which is going to be once every second for the ability lasts. And then if you constantly hit the enemy, it keeps refreshing that. So it's just extra damage on top of that. So I did do the percentage increases for every single one of these, starting with the attack mods, and there's no real particular order that I kind of did these in, but as long as I made sure I got on them. So in terms of like focus on singular, we saw a 45.86% increase, and we saw a massive 128.42% increase on the electrocution damage, which is quite nice. But it wasn't the best though, because maximized power came in here and did 64.63% increase on the base hit, and then 180.98% increase when it came to the damage over time. Singular Specialist wasn't too bad, 51.18% increase on the base hit and 143% when it came to the dot damage. Skill Simplification came in with 56.82, so you know, it's a little bit better than that, but obviously when we have a look at like Skill Simplification and Maximize Power and also Maximize Skill, which is going to be a little bit later on the list, we do need to factor in their downsides, and that is going to be one kind of thing to be able to, in terms of like the recommendations, in terms of like the most amount of damage that you can do is going to be this, but there is actually drawbacks to it, so there is quite a few independent factors that we do really need to have a quick look at, especially when it comes to Bunny, because we need her mana pool for us to be able to do our sprinting ability. And then on top of that, and the more, like, the less mana that we have, obviously that means the less that we're going to be able to sprint, so it's going to affect our speedrun times. And on top of that, when it comes to the emission, because some of these have cooldown modifiers on them, if we make it too long, we're not going to be able to have that 100% uptime, which once again affects like our killing potential with that ability as well. So we have a couple of things that we need to factor in. So lastly, we've got Skill Simplification, is 56.82 and 159.14% respectively. And then Technician, lastly, is going to be 34.16 and then 95.68. So this is bottom of the barrel. Technician is just not even worth using. There are 100%, it was like the worst in the category. If you're using Technician, I highly recommend that you do swap off that as quickly as possible. So then we swift over to the battle mods. We do get to have 6 in this category. That's going to be Electric Master, Electric Specialist, Focus on Electric, Maximize Skill, Power Increase, and Singular Master. So starting with Electric Master, we're able to see an increase of, just by itself, a 71.83% increase on that base damage, and then a 71.82% increase on the electrocution, so fairly consistent across the board there. We're going to see fairly similar numbers across the board when it comes to this anyway. There's only going to be one that's going to change. Electric Specialist is an 81.2% increase and an 81.21% increase on the damage over time. Focus on Electric is a 77.2% and a 77.21% increase. Maximize Skill comes in at a whopping 87.6%. This definitely one in the category. Once again, it's one of those that we do need to factor in that cooldown though. And then we also have the 87.59%. Probably a rounding error there, but in terms of like the numbers, but that's the numbers we can see on screen anyway. So that happens with the damage over time. Power Increase was just a very nice standard 65% increase across the board. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and that was very consistent with my findings. And then lastly, Singular Master, which is coming in at 75.25% increase on the damage, but then when it came to the damage over time, interestingly, it came in at 121.44%. So I was quite surprised with that. It was it definitely caught me off guard, that one. I wasn't expecting it, but in terms of like damage over time, it's easily the best one that's in that category. So shifting on from being able to have a look at our singular, or not necessarily just singular, because obviously that's the type of skill that it is, but just like looking at them individually, we now get to have a quick look at combinations. Now, the main thing that I did wrong when it came to the Freyna build was the fact that I just kind of took like a couple of them and just went, oh, I just want to check these ones because they did well in their previous kind of thing. But what there's definitely some hidden kind of calculations that potentially could arise from being able to combine some of them, especially when we start factoring in skill power and everything like that. So with this one, what I wanted to do is have a look at every single one of the combinations that exists on this list. Because of that, we had 30 combinations. And I've done it every single one of them. Like I said, this did take a little bit of time, but then once I got all the numbers for every single one of those combinations, I then sorted them by the base damage that's going to happen from the emission being able to go out, and that is what generates this table right here. And you can see that for the top half of the table, I've kind of put down an extras column as well, and the reason for the extras column is that you can see if there's like downsides or anything like that. I'm probably, by the time this video's gone up, I've probably color coded it as well, but you can see at the very top we have Maximize Power and Maximize Skill making its way to the top. But so obviously this is going to be increases to our modifiers, but it's also going to be a huge increase to our base skill damage as well, and that is the reason why it's able to achieve that top spot. So that's a 208.84% increase onto our base damage, and then a huge 427% increase onto our electrocution damage. So you can see that is the best combination. If you're purely looking at a DPS kind of way, if you're going to use like the mods to be able to help you out with bossing when it comes to going into Colossus battles and all that kind of thing, then that is going to be the combination for you. The main downside you're going to have with this is that this does come with 2 sets of plus 50% cooldown on this, which means that you're going to be seeing an increase of 100% on your cooldown. In case you haven't checked out the ability as standard has a 30-second cooldown, which means that if you add both of those mods on, you're only going to be able to activate this ability once every minute. And this ability only lasts for 20 seconds, so you've got to factor that in. It's going to have a 40-second downtime for a 20-second damage window without you kind of editing it and adding in some like duration ability or anything like that. And obviously, yes, you can reduce that down if you do use other cooldown mods and everything like that, but you know, that's still something that you need to factor in. That's 100% extra cooldown, and that's not going to be viable for being able to use for a farming build or anything like that. But it may be possible for a Colossus fight. Underneath that, we do have, once again, maximized power, but we do go with an electric specialist. The only change, the numbers there are kind of minimal in kind of like the changes there, but this will only be a 50% increase on your cooldown. So that means that you'll be doing a 45-second cooldown window. So you still will struggle to be able to get that 100% increase, or uptime, sorry, for emission being able to be constantly out. But it's going to be much more manageable than being able to go for a full-blown minute. So, you know, just once again, factor that in. If you have more than enough cooldown into your build, then you can definitely get away with this. Then feel free to be able to slot in that maximized power to be able to achieve the most amount of damage that you can do. Now, I have highlighted a couple extra ones on this this chart right here, and you can see that we do have skill simplification and electric specialist that's going to be under it. Now, while this does have a fair chunk of less damage in terms of it, so we are losing out on 24% on our base to emission damage, and then obviously we're losing around about 50%-ish, maybe closer to 60% when it comes to our damage over time with electrocution. The main thing that we don't have to worry about anymore is that we don't have a cooldown increase on it. Instead, we do suffer by 25% penalty to our MP. If we do have that, then obviously that's going to affect our sprint. So if you feel like you can get around it with things like skill cost reductions, if you can get away with it by having extra MP in terms of your components, in terms of like other mods that do exist onto your build, then feel free to be able to rock this one, and that is a downside that is, you know, possible to be mitigated. So that's actually not too bad. You take a little bit of kind of like a knock in terms of like pure damage, but to have a better sustain, to have that 100% uptime, it's going to be worth it in my eyes. Now, we do have another combination that's a little bit lower down, where it doesn't have any kind of downsides. In fact, actually, it has a positive, which is a minus 6% point or 6.1% to your cooldown, and that's going to be our combination of focus on singular and electric master. So if you are looking for a combination that is going to be the most like set amount of damage that you can do with your skills, and you're not looking for these massive negatives when it comes to your MP or when it comes to extra additional cooldown that comes onto any of your abilities, then this is going to be the one for you. Now, it does suffer a little bit in terms of like the damage over time department, but let's be honest, we're not relying on electrocution when it comes to our farming abilities, so that 171.36% increase when it comes to our base damage is going to be huge. That is going to be the best one to be able to go for if you're trying to avoid any of those negatives. So we were just looking at purely combinations, and I kind of wanted to take it a step further. In fact, I actually wanted to take it 2 steps further, because I wanted to also kind of fit it into a build, or, you know, to the start of a build anyway. So the idea with this one is that I wanted to originally have a look at what happens when you activate a reactor with this. What this does is, you can see the reactor I've got on screen right now. This came with a skill power of 28,634.33, and we're injecting that into everything that we currently have done. So when it came to maximize power and maximize skill, we're purely looking at those 3 that I've just highlighted. So we've got really bad downside, almost negligible downside if you can manage it, and then no downside whatsoever. In fact, actually is a positive. So this is going to be maximize power, maximize skill. This clocked in at just shy of 700% damage increase when it came to the emission damage itself, and the damage over time from electrocution is 1,264.68%. So that's quite a huge kind of leap forward from what we were just having a look at in terms of like combinations. So just being able to inject that extra skill power is huge. Skill Simplification Electric Specialist came in next at a 565.16% increase, and then 999.13% damage increase to our damage over time. But this is our mana reduction one, so, you know, if you can get around it, feel free to be able to go for that. It's still a solid increase, but just keep in mind that we aren't really hitting those heights of maximized power and maximized skill. And then lastly, we have Focus on Singular and Electric Master, and this is going to clock in at 526.72%, and then also 881.57. This is the one that does have a positive when it comes to the extras, but like you can see on the screen, we are suffering in the damage department, so you know, you've just got to weigh those options up. Now, the last thing that I did want to do, and like I said, this is the last step forward I wanted to do before we start like diving into every single combination of build that does exist, is lastly I wanted to add in the Slayer set. Now, I really do enjoy the Slayer set, especially for every single skill power based build that exists. So I do think that the Slayer set is worthy of being included here just to have a quick look at. And what this does is it gives us a nice 26.1% increase to our skill power. So I wanted to see how that gets injected into the build. What will we actually see in terms of returns? So starting with obviously maximize power and maximize skill like we have done in the last one, we instead get a 744.11% increase. So this is almost around about 50% increase just because of all those multipliers. And on top of that, the damage over time comes in at 1,454, 54% increase instead of that 1,264. Skill Simplification and Electric Specialist, that comes in at 677.39% increase, and then 1,286.01% increase on the damage over time. And then lastly, our Focus on Singular and Electric Master combination, this comes in at 585.85% and 1,058.98% in terms of our damage over time. Now, you can see that there is a massive discrepancy, and this gap is going to start expanding the more we actually start building into skill power modifiers and everything like that. So the rest of the build will actually start making that gap much wider, from being able to go from maximize power and maximize skill and then focus on Singular and Electric Master. But hopefully that this guide has actually given you some kind of information and given you some idea as to what kind of combinations you should be rocking, and these are the only three that I would possibly recommend depending on what your build is going for. If I was to choose a top one out of all of these, I probably would try and work that Skill Simplification and Electric Specialist into my build, but like I said, I'd have to try and work around that MP because that is quite devastating, especially once we start adding that in with Slayer set having the additional cost on top of it. It means that we're only going to be having very short bursts of sprint, but if I can find a way to be able to get around it, that's probably going to be the nice middle ground in terms of damage and also having that utility. But anyway, that pretty much wraps it up on the video. I hope that this video has taught you something useful. I hope it's actually given you some kind of information so that you can go into your builds and then just have a quick look and see what you can actually change around so you can do more damage, and then you can also use this information to be able to change any of your other builds as well. Of course, this is the part where I'd love to be able to hear from yourself. What do you think about these findings? Which descendant do you think I should do a deep dive into next? And has this actually changed your mind about some of your builds? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video, and as I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on the next video.